Sometimes, an entire life can shatter in a single morning. A smear of red lipstick on a collar, a door closing softly, and the world collapses before we cry. Emily Carter once believed that love could save everything until the day she was betrayed, carrying the child of the man who left her, and collapsed on the courthouse steps. But it was there, at the edge of despair, that fate led her to Michael Thompson, a stranger who lied to stay by her side and taught her how to breathe again through his quiet gentleness. This is not merely a love story. It is the journey of two broken souls finding each other amid the rains of Seattle and the spring on Queen Anne Hill, where love is born not from promises, but from the peace found in shared silences. Seattle's morning was draped in a thin veil of mist, raindrops tapping lightly against Emily Carter's kitchen window. She was pouring coffee, the soft hum of the espresso machine blending with the aroma of Arabica beans that lingered in the damp air. It was a morning like any other until she saw Ethan's white dress shirt draped over the chair. The collar was slightly creased, still carrying his cologne, but what made her pause wasn't the scent, the blurred red lipstick stain on the collar, small but vivid, daring, absurd in their otherwise orderly world. The red mark was like a fresh wound against the white fabric. She picked up the shirt, holding it closer to the light, her eyes fixed on it. Maybe she was mistaken. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, something accidental. She tried to reassure herself, then she looked again, clearly seeing the soft curve of a woman's lips. It couldn't be an accident. Her heart pounded. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the fabric. Ethan usually woke up earlier, but was still in the shower today. She could hear the steady sound of running water, as if nothing in their world had changed. His phone lay on the counter, the screen lighting up with a new notification. She had never been one to check her husband's messages, but what moved inside her now wasn't reason, it was instinct. She unlocked it. The first message read, "Last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again." Emily's vision darkened. Below it was a thread of messages, weeks, months long. Jokes, photos, plans. Each was like a knife carving away the trust she'd built over the years. Then she heard the bathroom door open, footsteps approaching. Ethan appeared, a towel wrapped around his waist, steam rising from his skin. He stopped when he saw her standing there, the shirt in her hand. His gaze moved from her face to the stain, then back again. A moment of silence, not remorseful, but calculating. "Where did you find that?" he asked evenly. "On the chair." Her voice cracked. "Whose is it?" He didn't answer. He turned away, opening the closet to choose another shirt, calm, as if they were discussing the weather. "Ethan," her voice trembled, "you owe me an explanation." He buttoned his shirt, eyes fixed elsewhere. "There's nothing to say." "Nothing," she let out a bitter laugh. "You cheat on me, and there's nothing to say," he sighed. "We're both tired, Emily. You really want the truth?" She nodded, tears welling. "I don't love you anymore," he said flatly. "I tried. I can't." The room exploded in silence. Emily stepped back, gripping the edge of the table. "What did you just say?" "I don't feel anything anymore." He put on his jacket, looking at her like a stranger. "I love someone else." That sentence didn't just end a marriage, it ended a lifetime of faith. Emily sank into a chair, choking on her sobs. "Do you remember our wedding? You promised to stand by me through every storm." Ethan looked out the window. "I remember. People change." "No, Ethan. Love doesn't change that fast." He turned to her, eyes empty. "It's easier to live alone than with someone you don't love." He left. No hug, no apology. The door closed softly, but in her head, it thundered. Emily sat there, looking around the house. Every piece of furniture they'd chosen together had become a witness to betrayal. She picked up her phone and sent one last message. "Please don't do this. We can fix ourselves." 3 dots appeared, then vanished, appeared again, disappeared again. Finally, the reply came, "I'm sorry, Emily. It's over." Everything inside her fell apart. That night, Seattle wept with her. She sat by the window, listening to the rain's mournful rhythm, the room filled with shadows and the scent of cold coffee. She remembered the morning he proposed, the warmth in his eyes when he said, "Forever." Now, that word echoed hollow and terrifying. There was no forever. Only a woman crumpled on the floor, clutching a white shirt stained with red lipstick, crying until there were no tears left. The days that followed blurred into each other. Day and night became one. The sound of Seattle's rain a soundtrack to her collapse. Emily didn't eat, didn't sleep. She turned to the other side of the bed every morning, still empty. The pillow still bore Ethan's imprint, his scent lingering faintly. Friends called, texted, tried to bring her out. She only answered, "I'm fine," but her voice was lifeless. When the divorce papers arrived, her hands shook so hard the pen slipped. Signing meant accepting that everything once real was now memory. The night before court, she stood before the mirror. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. "Who is she?" she whispered. The woman who once believed in love and laughed in the sun was now just a shadow. She opened the closet, fingers brushing the dresses Ethan used to admire. He once said she chose the blue one that made her look like spring. Somehow, she wanted him to remember. The next morning, it was still raining. Seattle never really dried. Emily drove to the courthouse, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. In front of the King County Courthouse, people hurried past, each carrying their own broken story. She looked up at the gray building, where vows turned into paperwork. The courtroom was plain, the light dim and yellow. Ethan was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, his face calm and detached. She wanted to believe he'd look at her and regret it, but he only nodded, like greeting an old acquaintance. The proceedings were brief. The judge read the terms and asked them to sign. The sound of the pen against paper was the final cut. "Any chance of reconciliation?" the judge asked. Ethan replied immediately, "No." Emily wanted to scream, "Yes, I do." But when she met his eyes, empty and distant eyes, she only whispered, "No." The gavel struck. "By the power vested in me by the state of Washington, this marriage is hereby dissolved." The sound tore through her chest. Everything faded except the erratic beating of her heart and the wave of dizziness that followed. She stood, trying to follow Ethan into the hallway. "Ethan, wait." He turned, annoyed. "What is there to say? I just need to understand." "Why?" "There is no why. We're done. You used to love me, didn't you?" "I thought I did." That sentence killed what was left of her. He walked away. Emily followed, vision blurred by tears. The courthouse steps swayed before her. Someone called out, "Ma'am?" the voice fading. She didn't know when she fell, only that someone was running toward her, footsteps pounding, a rough voice shouting, "Call an ambulance." A hand caught her, steady and warm. Between consciousness and oblivion, Emily heard that same voice whisper near her ear, "She's going to be okay. I'm here now." Then the darkness swallowed everything. Seattle kept raining, but for the first time in months, Emily didn't feel cold anymore. The first thing Emily Carter noticed when she woke up was the smell of disinfectant. The harsh white light from the ceiling made her eyes ache. She tried to turn her head, but everything around her was blurred except for the heart monitor's steady beep, beep, echoing like a rhythm pulled back from the edge. "She's awake." A man's voice, low, calm, and warm. As her vision cleared, she saw an unfamiliar face, a tall man with brown hair and gentle, weary eyes. He stood in a dark coat, looking at her like he'd just weathered a storm with her. "How do you feel?" he asked softly, afraid his words might hurt her. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "Harborview Hospital. You fainted outside the courthouse. I brought you here." She frowned, trying to recall. Ethan's back as he walked away, the courthouse steps, someone calling "Ma'am?" Then darkness. And now this. "Who are you?" He hesitated for a moment. His deep brown eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Michael Thompson," he said. "I was there, by chance. I couldn't just walk away when you fell." Emily looked around and noticed a man's coat draped over her. It carried the faint scent of cedarwood and mint the scent of a stranger who had pulled her back from the edge. A nurse entered, smiling. "Your husband stayed here all night. Very devoted." Emily froze. "My husband?" Michael turned away, avoiding her gaze. The nurse had already left before she could speak, leaving an awkward silence. "You..." She looked at him. "You told them you're my husband?" He nodded slightly. I didn't know your name. They needed someone to sign your admission papers. I didn't want them to think you were alone." Emily looked down at her hands, cold, thin, fragile. She didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," Michael said quietly, "but I wanted to." In that sterile white room, neither of them spoke for a moment. One had lost everything. The other had nothing left to lose. Hours later, the doctor entered, voice gentle. "We have something to tell you. Miss Carter, you're pregnant." The air froze. Emily's eyes widened. Her words caught in her throat. "Pregnant?" "About 8 weeks," the doctor confirmed. "Would you and your husband like to discuss this privately?" Michael's expression flickered with unease, but he nodded. "Thank you, doctor." When the door closed, silence filled the room. Emily looked down at her flat, still abdomen where a fragile life now existed amidst the wreckage of her love. No, that can't be," she whispered. "I didn't know." Michael sat beside her bed. "Are you okay?" She broke down. "No, not at all. He left me when I'm carrying his child." Michael said nothing, his eyes heavy with quiet sorrow. He didn't offer empty words like "I understand" because he knew understanding was never enough. He just handed her a tissue and stayed beside her, his hands clenched, but not reaching out. Outside, the rain began again. Seattle rarely remembered the Sunday. "Do you have a wife?" Emily asked softly. He nodded. "I did. She left that morning." She looked up. "The same day I fainted." "Yes," he said quietly. "Maybe that was the day we both lost everything." Their eyes met not as strangers, but as two souls colliding in a storm. When night fell, the hospital lights glowed amber against the ceiling. Emily drifted into sleep, tears still clinging to her lashes. Michael sat beside her, head resting against the chair. His thoughts wandered in the hum of machines to his broken marriage, to the hollow spaces inside him. He didn't know why he was there, why he cared about this woman. Only that when she fell, his heart seemed to stop. By morning, pale sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, brushing Emily's tired face. Michael was still there, arms folded, dozing in the chair. She watched him for a long while, the stranger who had stayed by her side all night, while the man who once swore to protect her had vanished without a trace. When Michael stirred, she said quietly, "Thank you." He smiled faintly. "Don't mention it. You don't have to stay." "Maybe I do." He glanced out the window. "Home is too quiet." She noticed the stiffness in his smile. Like her, he seemed to hold on to some fragile reason to keep breathing. The doctor said she could be discharged in a few days if her condition stayed stable. When he left, Michael asked, "Do you know where you'll go after this?" The question silenced her. The apartment belonged to Ethan. Her friends were far away. Her mother was in California, but couldn't face the words, "I told you." "I don't know yet." Michael paused. "If you don't have a place to go, you can stay at my house for a few days. I have a spare room." She looked up, startled. "I can't. We barely know each other." "It's not about that," he said. "I just don't want to see you alone. Trust me, I know what that feels like." Emily stayed quiet. She could hear the sincerity in his tone, not pity, not obligation, just the quiet recognition of one broken person seeing another. "You don't owe me anything," he added. "It's just peaceful there. Might be good for you." She looked down, torn. Pride told her to refuse, but the fear of emptiness made her want to hold on to anything that might help her breathe again. "Okay," she finally said. "Just a few days." Michael nodded. Just a few days. While he filled out her temporary discharge papers that afternoon, Emily sat by the window, watching people walk under umbrellas. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, while she had only a hollow space waiting to be filled with something she didn't yet understand. When they left the hospital, Michael opened the car door for her. She got in, fastening her seatbelt. The light rain traced crooked lines on the windshield, like unhealed scars. On the drive to Queen Anne Hill, Seattle stretched before them under dim lights. Raindrops caught the yellow glow of the street lamps and shimmered across her face. She glanced at Michael, his eyes calm, focused on the road. "Aren't you afraid of me?" she asked softly. "A stranger, a woman with too much baggage." He smiled. I've been living with my own baggage for 2 years. Having someone to share it with doesn't sound so bad. She let out a small laugh, quiet but real. She heard her own laughter again for the first time since Ethan left. Michael looked over, the corners of his eyes softening. That's a good sound. The car stopped before a house on a hillside, overlooking the water. It was large, white-walled, surrounded by a rain-soaked rose garden, cold, yet serene. "Welcome to Queen Anne Hill," he said. Emily stepped out, breathing in wet grass and young pine. She climbed the steps, the wooden boards creaking softly beneath her feet. The door opened, and with it, a new chapter began, though she didn't yet know that the man beside her, Michael Thompson, would change everything she believed about love. She looked around the living room, spacious, warm light glowing against the quiet. "You live here alone?" "Yes," he said, "since the day she left." The simple answer carried a sorrow as deep as Seattle's rain, steady, endless, and too genuine to hide. Michael set down her bag and poured 2 cups of tea. "If you need anything, just ask," he said. "This house has been quiet for too long." Emily held the cup, the scent of mint rising with the steam, warmth spreading across her palms. Outside, the rain still fell, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing alone in the storm. Michael Thompson's house carried the quiet scent of old memories. White walls, high ceilings, and picture frames hung in perfect alignment, as if measured by hand, but a sense of absence lingered everywhere. No laughter, no hurried footsteps, only the clock ticking and the steady rhythm of Seattle rain against the windows. Emily stood by the living room window with a cold cup of tea. She watched raindrops slide down the glass and realized she was lost in a peaceful and foreign world. Behind her, Michael was tidying up in the kitchen. The faint sound of clinking dishes, the soft tap of a spoon against porcelain. He moved slowly, like someone who'd lived alone for too long, afraid to break the fragile quiet around him. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. He turned, smiling faintly. "Do what? Take care of me like this?" He shrugged. "I'm just making breakfast. Besides, I'm not great with silence. This house hasn't had another voice in a long time." He placed a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of orange juice on the table. The aroma spread gently through the air. "Eat. The doctor said you need rest and nourishment for 2. Emily glanced down at her still flat stomach, a faint smile flickering across her lips. "I still can't believe I'm pregnant. Everything's happened so fast." Michael sat across from her, his gaze warm, steady. "Sometimes the things we don't expect are how life forces us to keep going." His words silenced her. She ate slowly, hands trembling slightly. Michael didn't speak further or try to comfort or erase the sadness. He stayed, and somehow, in that silence, she felt safe. When breakfast was over, he gathered the dishes. "I need to stop by the office. Make yourself home, TV, books, music, whatever you need. Call me if anything happens." "What kind of work do you do?" "Real estate," he said. "Or at least, I used to." "Used to?" He smiled, something evasive behind it. "Now I work freelance." "A lot has changed these past few years." Emily nodded, not pressing further. When the door closed behind him, the house sank back into stillness. She walked down the hallway, bare feet brushing the cool wooden floor. On the walls hung framed photographs, Michael and a blonde woman with a radiant smile, their hands intertwined. She was beautiful in a poised, confident way. Beneath the frame, a small engraving read, "Emma and Michael, 2019. Emily lingered before it, then turned away. Inside her, a quiet ache stirred, not jealousy, but empathy for that woman and herself. 2 strangers, both left behind. She curled up on the sofa and pulled the throw blanket over her shoulders. The house felt warmer now. In the hazy breath of a Seattle afternoon, she drifted into sleep. When she woke, dusk had fallen, the rain had eased, and the last light of day spilled through the windows, turning raindrops into strings of glimmering glass. From the kitchen came the faint sound of movement. Michael was back. His shirt was damp from rain, his hair clinging slightly to his forehead, but his smile was kind. "Did you get some rest?" "Yes, thank you." "No need to thank me. You're the first person to make this house feel alive in 2 years." He pulled 2 cans of soda from the fridge, opened one, and handed it to her. No tea, no wine, so I chose the safest choice. Emily smiled. You always find a way to make things feel lighter. Just a habit, he said. When life knocks you flat, you learn to talk to yourself so you don't lose your mind. They sat across from each other at the dining table. The soft yellow light glowed between them, the clock ticking gently in the background. The distance between 2 strangers had shrunk to the width of a table. You said you used to work in real estate. So now I'm trying to find myself again, he said quietly but with honesty. When Emma left, I realized I didn't know who I was without being her husband. Losing her meant losing my sense of identity. The words hit her like a mirror shattering inside. She understood too well. She had been Ethan's wife, orbiting his world until she lost her own. Now that he was gone, she felt hollow, like bark stripped from its core. And you? Michael asked. Before everything, who were you? Emily stared into space. I wanted to teach literature, but Ethan said it wasn't practical. So I stayed home cooking, cleaning, listening to him talk about work. I lived by someone else's breath. Michael nodded thoughtfully. We're more alike than I thought. A moment of silence passed. The room smelled faintly of rain and toasted bread. Outside, the wind brushed maple leaves against the window. Michael, Emily's voice was soft. Why did you lie to the doctor, say you were my husband? He looked up, eyes flickering with something profound and unguarded. Because they asked who your family was, and I looked around and saw no one. I thought no one deserves to be that alone. His voice was low, sincere enough to make her throat tighten. She nodded, tears welling unbidden. It's okay, he said gently. Crying is just the body's way of healing. You sound like someone who studied psychology. He smiled faintly. No, just someone who's fallen apart before. They laughed, a fragile, thin sound, but enough to chase the heaviness from the air. That night, Michael showed her to the guest room upstairs. Before wishing her good night, he paused at the doorway. If you need anything, my room's across the hall. Knock 3 times, I'll wake up. She smiled softly and nodded. Good night, Michael. Good night, Emily. When the door closed, she sat by the bed, looking at her small suitcase. Inside were only a few clothes, some papers, and the divorce decree she still couldn't throw away. On the desk sat a framed photo, Michael and the woman named Emma. Emily picked it up and studied it closely. Something familiar in that smile was the effort to look happy when your heart breaks. She set it down and lay on the bed. Outside, the rain began again. But this time, its sound wasn't cold, it was softer, like the steady breath of someone keeping watch. In the dark, Emily whispered, "Thank you, the man who lied," because it was that small lie that had saved her life. Seattle's morning was as it always was. Damp, cold, wrapped in mist. From the second-floor window, Emily looked out over the back garden. The rain from last night had left beads of water glistening on the rose petals. The rare sound of a sparrow broke through somewhere in the grey air, a small greeting to the new day. Michael was already awake. She heard his footsteps downstairs, the quiet hum of the coffee maker, then the faint scent of something baking. She walked down, still wearing the oversized sweater he had lent her the night before. He was pouring coffee, his back to her. When he turned, he smiled. "Good morning." "Good morning," she replied softly, afraid to disturb the fragile peace that seemed to hover between them. He handed her a cup. "Careful, it's hot." She took it. The rich aroma rose between them, the warmth trembling slightly in her hands. "Your coffee is better than anything I've ever had at a cafe," she said, half teasing. "That's the result of too many sleepless nights and too many thoughts," he said with a small smile. They sat at the table together. Rain pattered gently against the window. The sound had become background music for conversations that didn't need beginnings. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked. "Almost 2 years. And the photos of her? Emma?" He paused. "I haven't taken them down. Not because I haven't moved on, just because I'm not ready to erase the version of myself that existed then." She nodded. "I understand." Silence followed, only the sound of the spoon stirring and the rain touching the glass. After breakfast, Michael went out for work, and Emily stayed behind to tidy up. He hadn't asked her to, but she needed something to do, to feel useful, not like a guest in someone else's life. She cleaned the kitchen, wiped down the counters, and washed a few towels. While hanging them on the porch, she noticed a small letter tucked between old books. The handwriting on the envelope was smudged. To Michael. Don't forget to breathe. Inside was only a blank sheet of paper. Perhaps it was a reminder, something he'd once received when even breathing had felt difficult. She folded the paper gently and placed it back where it belonged. That evening, when Michael returned, he seemed surprised to find the kitchen lit and the table neatly set. You cooked? She smiled. Just some soup. I needed to do something that made me feel useful. He looked at the pot, the steam curling upward, the scent of onions and cream filling the room. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me. They sat down to eat, quiet but comfortable. Don't you feel lonely? Emily asked. Of course, he said, but I've gotten used to it. What about you? I think I'm still afraid of being alone. You'll get used to it. You say that like you've lived your whole life in solitude. Maybe I have. He smiled faintly. But I'm learning not to be afraid of it anymore. Emily studied him for a long moment. In his eyes was a dim but steady light, like a candle that refused to go out, no matter how hard the wind blew. She lay in the guest room that night, listening to the rain rolling over the roof. Across the hall, she heard Michael's footsteps, then silence. They were both awake, but neither called out. Maybe both feared breaking the fragile peace they'd just begun to find after so much ruin. Days passed slowly, gently. Emily began waking early, walking through the hill's morning fog, breathing the cold air. Each morning, she'd find Michael in the living room, reading the paper, soft jazz playing in the background. Sometimes he'd stand outside under the awning, holding a cup of coffee, staring quietly at the distant water. They didn't talk much, but learned about each other through small details. She discovered he had collected old books, but had never read them. Emma had been the one who had chosen them. He learned that she used to love photography, but had stopped since the divorce. One morning, he placed an old camera on the table. I found this in storage. Still works. She looked up, surprised. You want me to? Try shooting again. Maybe it'll help you see the world differently. She lifted the camera and pressed the shutter. The soft click echoed through the room, a slight sound that made her heart tremble. It had been so long since she'd heard it, the sound of someone beginning again. At noon, they went grocery shopping together. On the way back, at a red light, Emily saw a young couple crossing the street, hand in hand, laughing. She watched them quietly, a mixture of envy and wistfulness rising in her chest. Michael noticed her expression but said nothing. He just turned up the music, Sting's Fields of Gold. When they got home, she asked softly, "Do you believe people can love again? After everything?" He thought for a moment. "I think love doesn't die, it just changes form. Sometimes it becomes compassion." His words stayed with her all night. In the kitchen, they cooked dinner together. He chopped the vegetables. She added salt. Sometimes their hands brushed, briefly, and both fell silent. Not out of awkwardness, but because they were afraid to disturb something delicate that was beginning to form. Later, Michael took out an old guitar and strummed a few notes. Emily sat across from him, listening as he sang softly, his voice warm and rough-edged. "Maybe we're lost, but we're still breathing." When he stopped, she asked, "What's that song?" "It doesn't have a name. I wrote it when Emma left." "You still keep her song?" "I keep it for myself," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. "Because no matter who leaves, you still need a song to survive." Outside, the wind rose, and the rain fell harder. Emily looked at him and whispered, "Thank you for letting me stay." "And thank you for bringing life back into this house," he replied. In that moment, they didn't need to touch or make promises. They both knew they were slowly learning how to live again. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she realized that she no longer heard emptiness within the sound of rain. She smiled softly and placed a hand over her belly. "Hello, little one. We're safe now." March brought less rain to Seattle. On the rare days when sunlight filled the house on Queen Anne Hill, Emily realized something quietly miraculous. She no longer woke with dizziness, nor with the sharp ache in her chest. She was finding her rhythm again. In the mornings, she rose early and made coffee for them both. Michael read the paper or trimmed the roses in the garden. At noon, they ate together. Afterward, he worked in the study while she wrote about the smell of rain or the warm sunlight slipping through the curtains. One morning, as she arranged flowers in a vase, Michael said softly from behind her, "This house hasn't had flowers since the day she left." She turned. "You don't like them?" "No," he smiled. "I just forgot that I once did." His words stilled her. She understood forgetting wasn't erasing. It was simply living long enough with emptiness that it became ordinary. That afternoon, she brewed 2 cups of tea and brought them to the porch. Michael was standing there, eyes on the distant water. "Do you ever think it's really possible to start over?" she asked. He answered in a low voice, "I think starting over doesn't mean forgetting. It means daring to love, even while you still remember." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's been through more than one heartbreak." "Just one," he said, laughing softly. "But it aged me 10 years. They both laughed, gently. The evenings became tender rituals, shared movies, simple dinners, quiet conversations, sometimes just listening to the rain. Michael liked jazz. She preferred classical. They compromised with soft acoustic songs, music gentle enough to soothe without words. One night, during a storm, Emily woke from a nightmare. She was back at the door the day Ethan left, crying, begging him not to go. She sat up, drenched in sweat, heart racing. A knock came at the door. "Emily," Michael's voice. She didn't answer, just opened it. He stood there in a thin t-shirt, holding a glass of water. "You okay?" She nodded weakly, tears sliding down her cheeks. He didn't ask further. He handed her the glass. Her hands shook. "I had that dream again." "I know." "How do you know?" "Because I used to have it too." That broke her. She sobbed, and he rested a hand on her shoulder light, careful, as though touching a wounded bird. "It's all right," he murmured. "It's just a dream. The things that hurt now only live in your head. Do you ever stop missing them?" "No," he breathed. "But I stopped hurting." She leaned her head against his shoulder, unguarded. For the first time since the divorce, she allowed herself to be fragile and didn't feel ashamed. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, only their heartbeats answered it. After that night, something in the house began to shift. Emily laughed more. She learned to care for plants, to cook dishes she once feared ruining. When a recipe went wrong, Michael smiled and said, "That's okay, at least it tastes like effort." One afternoon, he took her to the nearby park. Sunlight filtered through the trees, shimmering across the lake. She sat on a wooden bench, hand resting on her belly, where the child inside her grew slowly. Michael asked, "Are you scared?" "Of course. I've never been a mother. No one knows how to be one at first. We all learn by loving someone we didn't know we could love." "You sound like someone who's been a parent." "No," he said quietly, "but I once wanted to be." She looked at him. There was a trace of distance in his eyes, but no longer the old sorrow. "Have you ever thought about getting married again?" she asked. He smiled. "I haven't thought about it. But if I ever meet someone who makes me feel at peace, maybe I would." She said nothing, but his words brushed lightly against her heart. That evening, when they returned home, Michael opened a drawer in the living room and took out a framed photo. "I've been meaning to put this away. Maybe today's the day." It was his wedding picture, he and Emma smiling in a summer garden. Carefully, he placed it on the table, removed the frame, and slipped the photo into a small wooden box. He didn't tear or burn it, just set it on the highest shelf. "Keep it," he said calmly, "but don't display it. Sometimes letting go doesn't mean forgetting." Emily looked at him, warmth blooming quietly in her chest. Something was changing, slow but sure. Later that night, they cleaned up the kitchen together. He washed, she dried. He asked gently, "If tomorrow were the first day of the rest of your life, what would you do?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'd learn how to love again, but I'd start with loving myself." He nodded. "Then you're already on the right path." After he went to bed, Emily lingered in the living room. She opened the window. The night breeze carried the scent of wet roses. She picked up the old camera Michael had given her and took a photo. Outside, the faint city lights reflected in the glass her shadow and the houses merging into one. At that moment, she knew she felt truly alive for the first time since everything had fallen apart. She whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Michael, for teaching me how to breathe again." Outside, the rain began to fall softly, as if Seattle was whispering back to two hearts learning how to live once more. That morning, it rained again in Seattle. The drops were fine, steady, weaving into a thin veil covering the grey sky. Emily sat by the window, a cup of warm ginger tea in her hand, watching umbrellas drift along the wet street below. She had grown used to these quiet days, mornings that began with the drip of coffee and ended with the scent of toasted bread. Life with Michael Thompson had settled into a slow, steady rhythm, gentle enough to make her feel safe. Sometimes she still dreamed, but dreams of Ethan no longer woke her in the middle of the night. They were only fragments now, distant memories, like old photographs she hadn't yet found the courage to throw away. Until that morning, her phone vibrated softly on the table. A message. Unknown number. "Emily, it's me. I need to see you." She froze. Her hand trembled. Her heart began to pound. 2 years had passed without hearing his voice, without seeing his name on a screen. The old feeling returned, fear mixed with a strange curiosity. She set the cup down, took a breath. It could be a mistake, a prank. But that name, she could never mistake it. Ethan Ross. She reread the message. Then again, no apology, no tenderness, just 4 words. "I need to see you." The sound of the door opening broke her stillness. Michael stepped in from the garden, rain still glistening on his coat. He noticed her pale expression. "Something wrong?" he asked. She slipped the phone into her pocket and shook her head. "No, just spam mail." He studied her momentarily, as if he understood but wouldn't press. "If it's painful, you don't have to talk now. Don't keep it inside forever." After breakfast, Michael left for a meeting. Emily stayed in the living room, the phone lying silent beside her. That single message sat on the screen like a reopened scar. She opened her notes app and typed a few lines to calm herself. "A message can't pull me back. The past is dust. Remember that." But her fingers still hesitated over the keys, then typed a reply. "Why do you want to see me?" The message was sent. A few seconds later, the phone lit up again. "Just to talk. One last time." She leaned back in the chair, torn in two. One part of her wanted to delete it and move on. Another whispered that maybe meeting him again was the only way to let go honestly. That afternoon, she told Michael she wanted to go out. He only asked, gently, "Do you need me to drive you?" She shook her head. "It's fine. I want to take a walk." Before she left, he handed her a small umbrella. "It's Seattle. You never know." She smiled faintly. "Thank you." As the car wound through the rain-slick streets, Emily felt her heart pulled between two worlds, the house with its golden lamplight and warm tea, and the shadowed corners of questions she had never dared to ask. In the end, she chose to face them. The cafe was on Maple Street, the same one where they used to sit in the early days, before everything fell apart. The glass door was still smudged, the jazz still soft and old. Only the people had changed. Ethan was already there. He looked almost the same, well-dressed, leather jacket, shining watch, but his eyes were tired, worn down by something he couldn't hide. When he saw her, he stood, forcing a smile. "You came. What do you want to say?" Her voice was low, neither cold nor kind. "Sit down, Emily. I don't even know where to start." "Then don't." He fell silent, then nodded. "I deserve that. What do you want from me?" "I'm in trouble. My company's nearly bankrupt. I just wanted you to hear me out." She stared at him. All traces of pity, anger, and even love dissolved in that moment. What remained was emptiness, clear, calm, and absolute. "I'm not the person you can call when you need something anymore, Ethan. I know." "Then why do it?" "Because you were the only one who ever told me the truth." She let out a small, bitter laugh. "You say that now, after walking away without a word?" "I was wrong," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "I thought a new love would make me happy. It didn't. She left when the money ran out. Now I have nothing." Emily looked down at the table. 2 years ago, those words might have broken her. Now, they just sounded distant. Did you come for forgiveness or for help? He looked up. I don't know. Then come back when you do. She stood. He reached for her hand, desperation in his eyes. Emily, I just wanted to hear your voice again. She pulled away, calm, steady. I used to want that too. But now, every time I hear yours, all I feel is silence. She turned and walked away. When the door closed, the bell above it chimed soft, but final. Outside, the rain had started again. Emily walked through the wet streets. Her heart felt hollow, but it was gentle, no pain, no heaviness. The rain touched her shoulders, cool and cleansing, tasting faintly of freedom. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Michael. Are you all right? She stopped, smiled. She didn't know how he knew, maybe he just felt it. I'm fine, she replied. Really fine. When she got home, the rain had stopped. Michael sat on the porch in his wicker chair with a cup of steaming tea. He didn't ask, just looked at her and smiled. Would you like to walk around the garden? He asked. She nodded. They walked side by side in silence. The ground was damp, the air carrying the scent of wet earth. You saw him, didn't you? Michael asked quietly, eyes forward. Yes. How did it feel? Like watching an old film I don't want to see again. And lighter? Yes. Michael nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Good. That means you can truly move on now. She looked at him, the soft starlight of Seattle reflected in his eyes. Thank you, Michael. For what? For not asking too many questions. Sometimes, he said, silence is the kindest answer. They stood there long, listening to the wind through the trees. And in that quiet moment, Emily knew she had finally stepped out of her own darkness. Early October brought a sudden chill to Seattle. The wind from Puget Sound carried the scent of salt and damp leaves, winding through streets carpeted with gold. Emily sat in the living room, a wool blanket draped over her legs, one hand resting on her belly now round and heavy. From the kitchen came the soft rhythm of Michael chopping vegetables, the fragrance of garlic and ginger rising into the air. He was the same as always, steady, careful, quietly devoted. Watching him do the most minor things was a kind of peace, as if the world could stay gentle just by following his pace. What are you cooking? She called. Ginger chicken soup. The doctor said, you need to eat something warm. You actually remember everything she said? No, he said, smiling. I recorded it. She laughed light, genuine. Everything in the house flowed in quiet harmony. No drama, no ghosts of sorrow. Only long, calm days where two people slowly relearned how to live after losing everything. She thought she was ready to be a mother until that night. It was almost 2 a.m. when she woke to a sharp pain low in her belly. At first it was faint, but it quickly grew stronger, relentless, folding her body in two. Michael, she gasped. He was at her side in seconds, eyes wide but steady. Okay, deep breaths. I'm taking you to the hospital. She could barely stand. He caught her, guiding her through the dark house and into the car. His hands trembled, but his voice stayed calm. It's all right. You're all right. We've got everything ready. The drive took only 10 minutes, but it felt endless for Emily. Through the blur of headlights and rain, she remembered only the feel of his hand gripping hers tight, warm, real. At the hospital, the nurses took her into the delivery room. Michael was stopped at the door. He nodded, forced a smile, but his eyes glistened. I'll be right here. Just call, and I'll come. Hours passed in chaos, bright lights, machines beeping, soft voices urging her on. She had never known pain like this, pain that tore through her but also made her stronger, fiercer. Between contractions, fragments of her life flashed through her mind. Ethan, who had promised forever and left, the nights she cried herself to sleep. She had to relearn how to believe in the day and the mornings. And Michael, who hadn't walked away and turned darkness into morning light. Almost there, Emily, the doctor said. I see the head. One more push. She gave everything she had left, and the world broke open with the sound of a cry. High, loud, alive. It's a boy. She barely glimpsed his tiny, flushed body before tears blurred her vision. The emptiness in her body was replaced by something radiant and warm like sunlight, finally flooding through years of shadow. When the nurse placed the baby on her chest, the world fell silent. It was just her, that small heartbeat, and the fragile rhythm of new life. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "It's Mama." The door opened. Michael stepped in, eyes red and shining. He froze when he saw them, mother and child, like a painting he didn't dare disturb. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She smiled weakly. "I am." "Look at him, Michael. He looks like you." He chuckled, moved closer, and touched the baby's head. "I've never seen anything more beautiful." She looked up at him. "Name him. What do you want?" "Noah," she said. "It means peace after the storm." He nodded, voice trembling. "Welcome to the world, Noah." 2 days later, they returned home. The rare Seattle sun streamed through the windows as if the city was welcoming Noah Thompson Ross, the name Michael had insisted include Ross, to honor the child's beginnings. Light filled every corner of the house. Michael had prepared everything: the crib by the window, bottles, diapers, and a board covered with careful notes. "Keep his hands warm. Sing while feeding. Sleep when he sleeps." Emily watched him, her heart swelling with something more profound than gratitude. He wasn't Noah's biological father, yet from the very first moment, he behaved as if the child were his own flesh and blood. That first night, Noah wouldn't stop crying. Michael paced the living room, holding the baby close, humming the lullaby his mother used to sing when he was small. Emily sat on the couch, tears filling her eyes as she watched them. "Tired?" she asked quietly. "No. Just afraid I'm holding him wrong." "You're doing fine." He smiled and kept rocking the baby. "They say if a child sleeps in your arms, he trusts you." Noah hiccuped once, then drifted into sleep. Michael laid him gently in the crib, tucking the blanket around him. Then he turned to Emily. "You should rest too." "I can't. Everything still feels so new." He sat beside her. "You'll get used to it, the way you got used to me." She smiled faintly. "You didn't really give me much choice." "Yes, I did. But you chose to stay." They fell quiet. There was nothing more to say. The truth lived in the stillness between them, in the peace they had built from pain, time, and trust. Outside, rain began to fall again. Emily leaned against his shoulder, listening to Noah's soft breathing. "I used to think happiness was loud and bright," she murmured. "Now I know it can be as simple as sitting here like this." Michael placed his hand over hers, "and knowing you don't have to face anything alone anymore." Beyond the windows, Seattle slept beneath a veil of rain. Inside the small house, new life had begun. Emily whispered, "Thank you for finding me, Michael." He squeezed her hand, eyes on the crib where Noah slept. "No," he said softly, "thank you for letting me stay." February in Seattle was bitterly cold, the rain falling in long, ceaseless curtains. The sky was the color of ash, thick with fog, and in the small house on Queen Anne Hill, Emily Carter, now mother to 3-month-old, Noah was learning a new rhythm of life. The rhythm of midnight cries, the clinking of spoons in milk bottles, and the steady beat of her heart whenever Michael held Noah in his arms and sang softly to him. Each day, she discovered something new, that love could be built from patience. No more grand promises or candlelit dinners, only a man who woke beside her every morning, brewed tea, changed diapers, soothed the baby, and never once said he was tired. That afternoon, while pushing the baby's cradle, Michael said quietly, "There's something I want to ask you." Emily looked up from the pile of Noah's tiny clothes. "What is it?" He hesitated. "I want to be his father. Officially, legally." She froze, the small shirt slipping from her fingers. "You mean, I want to adopt Noah, to make it official, so he can carry my name?" The room fell silent except for Noah's soft, steady breathing. "Michael," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you don't have to do that. You already are his father." "No," he said gently. "I want it written down." "Why?" "Because if someday I'm not here, there'll be proof that he's my son. I want him to bear the Thompson name, not just because I love him, but because I love you." Emily couldn't tell if the tears in her eyes came from joy or fear. "Are you sure? This means taking on everything, even what isn't yours." "I never thought of Noah as not mine." His words were calm, but something in them left her breathless. He sat down across from her, eyes steady. I know this isn't simple. It'll need papers and the consent of the biological father. But I'll handle it all if you say yes." Emily looked at the man who had stood beside her through every fear, every sleepless night, every fragile step of learning to be a mother. She didn't need to ask if he loved her. She knew. He looked at Noah as if the child was a miracle. The way he said we instead of you and the baby. "All right," she said softly. "If you're sure, then so am I." Michael smiled. A small, rare smile that warmed everything it touched. "I've never been surer of anything." 3 days later, they went to the lawyer's office. Outside, the rain kept falling. The mirrored downtown towers glowed in the wet light, blurred like old memories. The lawyer, an older woman with silver hair and round glasses, flipped through a folder. Her voice was slow, precise. "Since Noah's biological father is still living, we'll need his written consent. Once the petition is filed, if there's no objection, the adoption will be finalized within 6 weeks." Emily's heart thudded. "And if he refuses?" The lawyer looked over her glasses. "Then the court will consider evidence of abandonment. It's harder, but still possible." Michael took her hand. "He won't contest," he said quietly. "Ethan doesn't want anything to do with this. Trust me." She wanted to trust him. But that night, while Noah slept, she sat by the window, watching the rain fall hard against the city. Part of her feared the past might return. Ethan, the man who had vanished for months, might suddenly reappear, trying to reclaim what he once threw away. Michael came up behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You're thinking about him again?" "Yes. I'm afraid he might change his mind. If he does, I'll fight. No one's taking our son from you." She turned and saw in his eyes a light she could lean on. She felt she wasn't fighting alone for the first time in years. By April, cherry blossoms blanketed Seattle. Their house was full of laughter. Noah could roll over now, giggle loudly, and each time Michael bent down to tickle him, the baby reached out as if to hold the whole world. The adoption papers were sent in. Every morning, Michael checked the mailbox, as if one signed document could finally make their world whole. One afternoon, Emily was playing with Noah when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find the mailman holding a thick envelope sealed with the court's insignia. "Court notice," Michael said, scanning it. "Hearing on the 12th. We'll have to go to court? Just a formality. It counts as consent if Ethan doesn't respond by the deadline." She nodded, trying to hide her worry. For nights after, she woke to check on Noah, her heart gripped by a quiet fear, afraid of losing what she had finally found. Michael always woke, wordless, reaching for her hand in the dark. The morning of the hearing dawned bright, a rare gift in Seattle. Emily wore a pale blue dress, and Michael carried Noah. The baby looked serene and curious in a tiny white shirt with a pacifier between his lips. The judge, a gray-haired man with a kind voice, glanced over the files and smiled. "No response from the biological father," he said. "That means no dispute. Mr. Thompson, your background and finances are in excellent order." He turned to Emily. "Miss Carter, do you consent to Mr. Thompson adopting Noah?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And Mr. Thompson, do you understand your obligations?" Michael squeezed her hand. "I do, completely and willingly." The judge smiled and tapped his gavel once. "Then, as of today, Noah Thompson is legally your son. Congratulations." The soft thud of the gavel sounded like music, but to Emily, it was the sound of a new beginning. She looked at Michael, the man who had once been a stranger on the courthouse steps, now the father of her child, her soon-to-be husband, her closest companion. On the drive home, rain began to fall again. Seattle always seemed to hide people's tears beneath its own. Michael drove with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around hers. "I told you," he said quietly. "He wouldn't return." "I know, but even if he did, I know you'd still be here. Always." She leaned her head on his shoulder, glancing back at Noah sleeping peacefully in the car seat. For the first time, they were truly a family, not just in their hearts, but in the eyes of the world. Seattle had entered summer, yet the rain persisted. Sudden showers soaked the path before the porch, weighing down Michael's roses until they glittered with droplets like glass pearls. Emily sat in the living room while Noah crawled across the carpet, tiny fingers clutching at the edge of the couch. His laughter rang through the house, pure, bright, alive like a song the walls had been waiting to hear. Life had settled. Since Noah had officially become a Thompson, everything had fallen into rhythm. Michael was slowly returning to work, and Emily edited manuscripts for a small Seattle publisher from home. They didn't discuss the future much, no one mentioned wedding or forever. However, the answers were already there. Michael Chale brushed his fingers against her, handing her a cup of tea, or Emily smiled, watching him rock Noah to sleep. While Michael was at work that afternoon, Emily opened her laptop to check her emails. Among them was a name that froze her heart. From ethan.ross@rossinvestments.com. Subject: We need to talk. She stared at it. 2 years no calls, no messages. And now he reappeared with an email as cold and formal as a business memo. She clicked it open. I heard you got remarried. I need to see you. About Noah, I have a right to know the truth. The truth. 2 words that cut deep, reopening a wound she thought had healed. She rose and paced the room. Outside, Seattle was the same color as memory gray, unyielding. She looked at Noah, sitting on the rug, laughing at his wooden ring, so small, so innocent, and every muscle in her body tensed. What did Ethan want? He'd had his chance to be a father and walked away. Now, when peace had finally returned, he wanted to shatter it. When Michael came home, she was still at the table, eyes red. He set down his briefcase and came closer. What happened? She handed him her phone. He emailed me. Michael read in silence, lips pressed tight. He didn't look angry or surprised, just still, the kind of stillness that runs deep. Did he say where he wants to meet? No. We need to talk. He set the phone down, eyes steady. What do you want to do? I don't know, she said, her voice rough. I'm scared he'll ruin everything. I won't let that happen. His tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Michael bent down, lifting Noah, who giggled, babbling dada, softening the air around them. I don't know what he wants, Michael said, but I do know this. No one is taking Noah from us. Tears welled in her eyes. Promise me. I promise. A week later, Ethan Ross appeared at their door. The rain had just stopped, and the air was still heavy with moisture. Michael opened the door. In the dim light, the man who had once destroyed everything stood there, black suit, neat tie, but a different face. Gone was the arrogance. In its place, exhaustion and regret. You're Michael Thompson? Ethan asked, voice dry. Yes. You know why I'm here. Michael crossed his arms, leaning lightly against the doorframe. I can guess. Emily stepped out, Noah in her arms. Ethan's gaze landed on the child, and for a brief, sharp moment, what flickered there wasn't love, it was possession. That's my son, he said, low and firm. No, Michael answered, calm as stone. That's my son. Ethan gave a short, bitter laugh. You think adopting another man's child erases a father's rights? Emily's hold on Noah tightened. You erased your own rights when you left, Ethan. I didn't know you were pregnant. It's not my fault you weren't around to find out. The air thickened. The sound of rain began again, tapping faintly on the roof. Michael's voice stayed even. What do you want, Ethan? To sue? Or to stir up what's already buried? Ethan was silent for a moment, then sighed. I'm not here to fight. I want to see him. Sometimes. Emily stared at him. See him for what, Ethan? To make up for what you did? No visit can undo the years you weren't there. He looked down. I know. But I've lost too much already. I need to know he's alive, that he's all right. Michael stepped closer, his tone quiet but unshakable. He's more than all right. He's loved. And if you really care about him, you'll let him stay that way. The three stood there in the thin rain, saying nothing more. Ethan looked at Noah, fast asleep on Emily's shoulder, then turned away. As he stepped down the porch, Emily called softly, Ethan. He paused, but didn't look back. Thank you for coming. But next time you miss him, pray, instead of knocking. Ethan nodded once and left. His black car disappeared into the rain. Michael stood long before wrapping his arms around her from behind. You did well, he whispered. She leaned into his chest, voice trembling. I'm still afraid he'll come back. If he does, Michael said, I'll still be here. Always. Noah stirred, his tiny hand clutching his father's shirt. Emily smiled through her tears. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the roof, but inside that house, a quiet light burned on, steady and warm. Seattle slipped quietly into a late spring. Along the slopes of Queen Anne Hill, cherry blossoms bloomed in pale pink clouds. Their petals drifted onto the sidewalks, mingling with the morning mist, as if someone had scattered memories across the streets. Emily opened the window, letting the scent of damp grass drift in. Noah was running now, unsteady, wobbling steps, but every time he fell, he laughed, his eyes bright as sunlight. Michael was outside, fixing the wooden fence, sleeves rolled up, a sheen of sweat on his brow. She watched him for a long while. There was something about the sight of him, something quiet, profound, and sure. It wasn't the kind of love that burned like fire, but the kind that warmed like morning light. Since the last time Ethan had appeared, no one had spoken of the past again. He had vanished, leaving only a name on a legal document and a late apology. Life went on, peacefully. One afternoon, Michael came home with a small box. "What's that?" Emily asked. "A gift. For who?" "For all three of us." He opened it. Inside were 3 silver bracelets, each engraved with a name: Michael, Emily, Noah. She smiled. "When did you get this romantic?" "It's not romance," he said softly. "I just want us to remember, no matter what happens, we're a family." Her throat tightened. He took her hand, his gaze steady and kind. "I've never proposed to anyone twice, but if I ever did, it would be to you." She laughed through her tears. "You don't have to kneel." "I know," he said, "but I want to." He set the box down and knelt. "Emily Carter, you've walked with me through the longest winter of my life. You gave me a home, a son, and a reason to believe that people can love again. Will you marry me?" She didn't need to think. She nodded. In that moment, she realized happiness wasn't made of grand gestures or bright lights. It was simply seeing yourself reflected in someone else's eyes, calm, whole, and loved. A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms, and for a moment, it felt as if Seattle itself was smiling with them. Their wedding was held on a quiet Saturday afternoon in the backyard garden. Just a few close friends and neighbors. No loud music, no elaborate dress. Emily wore a simple white gown, her hair loose, and she was holding a bouquet of pale roses, the same ones Michael had planted the year before. Noah was the smallest, best man in history, white shirt, blue bow tie running in circles and laughing until he tumbled into his mother's arm. When the officiant read the vows, Michael looked at Emily, his voice steady but thick with years of unspoken memory. "I, Michael Thompson, vow to love you through rain or sun, whether anyone understands or not, because I know, as long as I have you, I am home." Emily took his hand, trembling but sure. "I, Emily Carter, vow to love you not because you saved me, but because you taught me how to save myself." Applause broke out, but they barely heard it. They just looked at each other, and in their eyes were light and rain and everything in between. After the ceremony, they sat together on the porch. A soft drizzle fell as the sun dipped low, turning the sky a honey shade. Noah slept in his crib beside them. "Do you remember?" Emily said quietly. "We met at the courthouse the day my world ended." "I remember," Michael smiled. "You fainted, and I had no idea why I was running toward you. Maybe I've been running to you ever since." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And I'm still learning not to be afraid of happiness." "You don't have to stop being afraid," he whispered. "Just keep choosing to believe. A little more each day." The wind stirred, scattering petals around. Every crack and scar had been mended inside the little house by time, patience, and kindness. Noah shifted in his sleep, his lips curling into a dream. Emily laid her hand over his chest, then looked at Michael. "I think we're going to be okay." "I know we are." Night fell. Seattle's lights shimmered across the distant water, glowing gold like 1,000 quiet memories at rest. Michael wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice a gentle murmur in the cooling air. "I used to think destiny was just something people wrote about. Now I know sometimes destiny is finding the right person when you've finally been broken enough to understand love." Emily smiled through her tears and turned to kiss him. Outside, the rain began again, But neither of them felt the cold this time. Spring on Queen Anne Hill unfolded softly, like a final song for two souls who had once been broken, yet still found the courage to love once more.